Welcome to the Garden Talk podcast, where we interview growers from all over the world, both beginners and experts, seeking to learn more about what they know about gardening and how they do things in their garden. What's up, everybody? For those of you that don't know me, my name is Chris, aka Mr. Grow It, and you're tuned into the Garden Talk podcast. This is episode number 165. In this episode, I interview Jorge Cervantes. Jorge is a legend in the horticulture industry with over 40 years experience. He is an author and has written over 40 books. I ask him a variety of questions in this episode, such as the 24-hour light cycle, temperature, cloning, pruning, flushing, and more. If you want to see short clips of these podcast episodes, search Garden Talk Clips on YouTube. I also have a gardening channel where I show the plants that I grow. Both of those channels will be linked down in the YouTube description section below. One of my goals for this podcast is to bring free information about gardening to the general public. That being said, I'd like to thank the sponsors of today's episode who help make that goal possible. Thanks to AC Infinity for sponsoring this episode. Check out their trim tray. This kit features 3 trays with sorting and sifting screens to give you the flexibility to catch leaves or trichomes. In addition to the standard catch bin, it features a food-grade stainless steel tray that, when used with the sifting screen, lets you easily collect trichomes without getting them stuck. There's more to it, so click the link in the description section below so you can learn more about their trim tray, and the discount code MrGrowIt15 works on both Amazon and their website, acinfinity.com. Stash Blend. Several additives in one blend, so you no longer have to buy individual bottles. Check it out at stashblend.com, link in the description section below, and use the discount code THESTASH. Spider Farmer. Check out their upgraded SE series of grow lights. These grow lights are smart app controlled, use Samsung LM301H Evo diodes, which have a PPE of 2.85 micromoles per joule, have a folding design, and are dimmable with digital display. They're passively cooled and can be daisy chained up to 50 lights. More information is linked in the description section below, and discount code MrGrowIt5 works on both Amazon and their website, spider-farmer.com. And we are back, and I'm joined with Jorge Cervantes. How you doing today?
Good. Lovely. Beautiful day here in just south of Barcelona.
Man, it is an honor to have you on the podcast today. Your Grower's Bible was the first book I ever bought. I started growing back in 2010, and I think, a year into it. I ended up buying that book, and it was my go-to guide for so many years. You're a real prominent figure in the space, and I'm just so excited to have you on here today to talk about a variety of different things. But first, before we get too deep into those things, can you give us a little introduction? Tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of how you got into gardening?
Yeah, let's see. Actually, I've always liked gardening. Since I was a little kid, I liked gardening. I was the only one in my family that liked gardening. Little kids, they grow two crops that all little kids grow. Radishes, because they're so fast. Like those little, the little red ones. What the heck do they call those? I can't remember what they call them, but they're really fast. They're like 28 days. And then the other one that all little kids grow is corn, sweet corn, because it's a C4 plant, and C4 means most plants are C3, which means they fix carbon, but C4, that means they grow faster. So, it's one of those plants that grows fast, and it'll grow taller than you as a little kid. So it's pretty cool. So I started with that, and then when cannabis came out, I just got really interested in it, and I lived in Southern California and started growing in the hills behind Santa Barbara, a little town right next to it called Montecito. It means little mountain in Spanish. And since then, they've had like mudslides and stuff. But anyway, I started a long time ago. I wrote this book here, and nobody had published it. They didn't want to. Nobody would even print it. So I had to print the book myself. I did all my own artwork. It's pretty limited artwork, and then I had a few photos, but all the photos were black and white, see? But that's all I could afford. The book is 96 pages, sold for $8.95. And I printed the book myself. First year, this thing sold 6,000 copies. That was back in 1983, just in the Northwest, Washington and Oregon. and a little bit in Vancouver, BC, and a little bit in Northern California. But since then, I've written like 50 books. 50 books, yeah, at least 50 books. And they're published in 11 different languages. All the 5 common languages, European ones. And then there's some other cool ones. I got this one I'm quite proud of. This is a Japanese book. This is a little hydroponic book I did. Here's another one I did. This is it's like this is the English edition here. That's probably the one that you saw.
That's the one I have, yep.
Yeah. This is the one that finally did really well. And this is the 5th edition. Yeah, 5th edition from 2006. That's right. And this one, this Russian edition. So there are 11 different languages, and then this book here, this is encyclopedia. It's like definitely my best book ever. But so I'm giving this one away. I give it away on my website. I've also done lots of videos. These are the videos I did with New York Magazine, High Times, and did a lot of these. And actually, I did one of them in Vancouver, BC, or Lower Mainland, actually. And that's in Canada. I did another one in the Netherlands, mainly in Amsterdam. And then I did another one in Spain. And most of that was shot around where I live in Barcelona. But the deal is, I got on the internet, I got on YouTube early on. And made it through. That's when it was really expensive to produce videos and stuff. And so there wasn't a lot of information out there. And the production values were, much different than they are today. So what happened was, anyway, I got, these videos went all over the world. I mean, I literally had millions and millions of views of these. And then I started making my own. I made about 300 videos, I guess. Yeah, I do garden tours and backyard stuff. I had 3 or 4 different garden beds that were full of different varieties of plants and stuff. And I just go through and did that. But I started about 5 decades ago, like in the 80s, early 80s. And that was my public life. This book here came out in 1983. And then after that, it's been a heck of a long career. It's been more than 40 years. 42 years now. 42 years I've been at this. Same stuff, I've traveled a lot. I've spent a lot of time in Europe. I moved here. I've been here officially about 25 years. So over a third of my life has been here. Spent a lot of time or a bit, not tons, but a bit in Latin America, South America, Mexico, Australia. I've been Australia. Haven't spent any time in Africa. Was in Japan, like that one book of mine's Japanese, where in the heck ever it is. Yeah. So anyway, I've done a lot, and then I had to deal a lot with this subject of, these 2 books are actually pretty much the same book. One of them is about a specific plant, and the other one's about all kinds of different plants. But this book sold very, very well for many years until life changed in the United States. Let's put it that way, in the late 90s. Yeah. So that's a little bit of background. Like I said, I've been at this a long time. I know a lot of people, and probably more people know me. I used to wear a disguise Yeah, I used to wear a disguise. Let's see that. Well, there's a little caricature of this one, of me in a disguise here, where I wear dreadlocks. Maybe, no, I guess there's another book here that I was in a disguise. But I just don't always, oh yeah, there's Russian books. Oh yeah, here's some more disguises of me. This is me in the videos. I wore the disguise because, well, back then times were definitely different. But what was the deal was, there was no internet, so it's really easy. I could go across borders and everything. All I had to do was look differently, and it sure helped a lot. It helped a heck of a lot. Now it doesn't help at all. They just run my name either way. Any name I want to put out there, they just run that. Yeah, they know who I am. But anyway, I've certainly seen a lot of change. I've seen patterns happen, yeah, but lots of change, and that's probably the biggest thing I've seen is change. And there's way more information about indoor cultivation now, way more than there used to be. And we know a lot more about light and, in general, indoor lighting, definitely.
Incredible. You have done so much good work over the years. You mentioned, it was 1983 was your first book. That was actually 2 years before I was born. You've been at it for a very long time, and you've really paved the way for not just access of the information, but also for other content creators to put themselves out there. Your DVD is still on Amazon today. So somebody could actually look that up and watch it. And I actually watched it about a handful of years ago. Now, just brought back some memories. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you can probably find it. High Times they're I don't know what you'd call it, if they're in receivership or whatever it is, but they're in big trouble with the Federal Trade Commission and stuff. So I don't know really who's in charge of the asset there. That'd be a property. All of these, they own the rights to these videos. So I don't know what the story is there, but you can probably find them on the internet. I know they wouldn't let me put them on my site, and that kind of pissed me off a bit. I mean, I certainly made them a lot of money.
Oh, I can imagine. Yeah, I can imagine how much. But yeah, your content has definitely been exposed all over the world, and so many people have gotten value and learned how to grow medicinal plants because of you. So it's really awesome what you did. And you're still going, which is really, really inspiring to see. Now, on this podcast, I do have a variety of viewers. I've got folks that are beginners, some folks that are intermediate, probably a smaller amount of advanced growers, but I feel like mostly it's beginners and intermediate growers. So I'm going to go into some questions here. And really, this podcast is kind of to get information about like hands-on stuff. And some of the stuff, there's some of these questions that I have, which I've given you in advance, it really goes off of things that were in your book. I would kind of want to get a little bit deeper into or clarification. So the first one I want to jump into has to do with the 24-hour light cycle. So a lot of folks are just giving, when they're growing indoors, they're just giving 24 hours of straight light and no hours of darkness. My question for you is that optimal? Do plants need a rest period at all?
Yeah, they do actually. You can hype them up like that, but what happens? Here's the deal. It's real similar to people or animals, like a horse, for example. You ride that horse too long, he's lathered up. Maybe he can keep going, but he's gonna fall over dead. He's not gonna work too hard. Same with the dog, same with the person. You can only take so much. If it gets too hot outside, you can't handle it. Your body's got to rest and recover. And that's when the growth and everything takes place. Well, when you push the heck out of everything, plants, people, animals, what happens is, especially in plants, the cells aren't as strong. They got weaker walls, it's just like not as strong. It's just a little bit narrower. And so everything is just like not as strong, not as strong. So that happens. That's the first thing. It doesn't have time to catch up and grow and metabolize everything. Because see, they've been growing outside for like millions of years, right? Millions of years, and they're used to this regular schedule. And anybody that's grown very much at all, any kind of plants, knows that, the last thing you want to do is uproot that plant or change that plant schedule, because it likes a regular schedule. So yeah, it definitely needs a downtime, and you're not gonna make it grow any faster. I talk to a lot of people, like some guys are mechanics, that are into growing indoors, and they liken everything to an internal combustion engine. And it's not the same thing. They just don't work the same way. You got a lot more variables here, and you got soft tissue. You don't. You've got water, not rather than oil. Complete different values. So, yeah, it's important. It's important. Mainly, the thing, especially new people, you want to follow what Mother Nature's doing. And it works. Works every time, or usually.
Good to know. Yeah, I personally go after the 18-6 light cycle for the veg stage to give some rest period, but I do know a handful of folks that strive for the 24 hours of light. And so I was just curious on, because there's a lot of people that say that it's perfectly fine and that plants don't need a rest period. Others say they do. So yeah, I'm happy that you revealed some stuff for us here.
Yeah, science says that there's a lot of chemistry that goes on during that time.
Got it. Now, one of the things that's in your book, which I wanted to bring up, was talking about the sex of the plant and how environmental factors can influence it. So, for example, it says things like increased nitrogen for more females, lower potassium for females, lower temps for male plants, lower humidity for male plants, more blue light for female plants. Is all that stuff still accurate today?
Yes. Yeah, very much so. Very much so. And those are that's for regular plants. And basically all you're doing is making stacking the deck in favor of more female plants. So basically you make a nice life for the plant, and they're going to make more female plants. Another dioecious plant, holly, for example, that's another dioecious one. What's another one? Kiwis. Kiwis is another one. Those are perennials. Yeah.
Okay, got it. Yeah, I know there are testing facilities. You can actually take a sample of it when it's a seedling and send it out for DNA sex testing. So I wasn't aware that you could actually get it tested and then they could say it's female, but if you're vegging it wrong, right? If you're too low of temps, for example, it could increase your chances of males. Just look at the list here. Longer days, 18 plus hours of light says more males. So that was a pretty surprising thing to me. I figured I'd just touch base and figure out if that was still true or not.
Yeah. It's really interesting because, with the sex, there's a lot of, especially lower animals and snails and worms and stuff, they change sex back and forth, from male to female, or they'll be both sexes. Yeah, it's and plants too. It's like that. Yeah, higher things, they tend to have it sorted out a little bit better, but not always.
That's interesting. So another thing it says in your book, it says that medicinal plants virtually stop growing at 85 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 25 degrees Celsius. Now, is that just certain genetics or all genetics? Will CO2 supplementation allow the plant to grow at those higher temps?
Boy, I'll tell you, when I wrote that, I was mainly talking about the indoor plants and stuff. And with outdoor plants, man, you can push those a lot more. And on some stuff, I just was, either I didn't qualify stuff or I was just plain wrong, on stuff. But you look at an outdoor plant, one that's planted in the earth, that was planted early on, and it's got a real deep taproot. that thing, it can take a lot of abuse, a heck of a lot of abuse. And it's got a heck of a good water source already, and it's getting it from very deep. And it's got lots of foliage on it that it can also use to shade the other plants. And if it's got a real good source of water, and it's got a good root system, it can take way higher temperatures than that. As far as like the upper end, I couldn't tell you for sure, because you mentioned varieties earlier or strains earlier. That makes a huge difference, because see, there's plants I remember my friend, God, so many people are dead now. Felix is gone. A Swiss guy lived in Ticino in the south part, Perunsona. But he was growing what he called a Perpiana tricensis. Yeah, from tricensis. Yeah, he gave it a Latin name. Purple from Ticino. But it could take a freeze. It could handle a freeze, and it could take a freeze down to about like 25, 26 degrees Fahrenheit for a couple of nights. You go past 3 nights and it would have trouble. But that's definitely a genetic characteristic, it's big, and the same for heat, because if you look at leaves, it's so simple. It's real physical. You look at the leaves, the indica leaves, where they grow and they're cooler in the mountains. They're wide. They're broad leaf, because that way they need that to gather more sunlight and everything. But you look at the plants that get really, really high sun in the tropics, they have a narrow leaf, and so it'll dissipate heat faster. It's all a function, so they acclimate to all of these things. So we just got to really learn a hell of a lot more than we know about this plant and other plants too, as far as their specific tolerances go, because we just don't know. And a lot of times people try to get you to say, well, I want a general statement that's true for everybody. It's like, well, no. It's like saying, I will cure cancer. Okay, which one? Which cancer will you cure? There's many types of cancer. And you can't just say, I'm going to or you can't just make general statements, because we really just don't know enough.
Yeah, there are so many variables when it comes to growing these plants, and science hasn't uncovered everything when it comes to it. And that's, I think, one of the things that makes it so exciting to be in this space, is that more and more things are being uncovered. It seems like almost every day, every week, there's some new information coming out. There's studies being done on different aspects of the plant, and it just really makes things more exciting and fun to grow these plants, in my opinion.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. Yeah, I'm pretty excited. I'm like, I stay with this life. I mean, I'm like 71 years old, right? So I'm like old guy now. And I just don't know anything different, and it's kept me entertained all this time. so I think there's going to be a lot of other people like this too. It's certainly kept you entertained.
Absolutely, for sure. I want to talk about clones next, particularly taking clones, what part of the plant to take it in. There are a lot of folks that say the top of the plant's the best. Some say, well, no, the middle of the plant is best. Others say the bottom part of the plant is best. What's your take on that? What's the best part of the plant to take clones from?
Okay, when I wrote that, did that research there, what was it? Said they wanted a lot of cellulose, stiff cellulose. That's that, and I read that several times. And then I remember I was over in Austria, and I did a video, actually a bunch of videos over there at Flowery Field. Because see, over there they can grow clones and sell them, but they're not supposed to flower them. So, my buddy Alex, his last name Brokewall, yeah, he has flowery fields. Well, he's a lawyer, and he figured the law out, and he figured it out about 15 years ago. So he's been making like literally hundreds and thousands of clones every year since then. Yeah, so he's been very, very helpful. But those guys, they had some basic rules, and that was you have as many budding sites as possible or as many branches as possible. And they were taking all the clones off the top of the plants where they basically have a high concentration of nitrogen. And that's just exactly against everything that I read, that I thought I believed. But it works great, and I've seen so many people do it since then. So it really doesn't matter where you take the clones from, as long as the plant's healthy and growing. And healthy, I gotta qualify that, because a lot of times they can have powdery mildew inside, and you can't tell. They could have some kind of a systemic problem, so that's incredibly important to keep your plants clean and keep them sterile. Super important. And then another thing, because see, Alex really impressed me a lot. He doesn't keep his mother plants, for more than 6 months, and he says 6 months is about the end of a productive life for the females, and they do real well during that time. And he also grows them in what do you call those? The containers that are self-pruning. Yeah, air pruning containers. Yeah, root pruning containers. And and keeps them growing fast, cranked up all the time. So yeah. But like I said, it doesn't bother me to admit I'm wrong. I mean, if there's somebody got better information, fine, let's see it.
Yeah, I personally take clones taken from all parts of the plant. I haven't had a problem with rooting, so I'm glad that you mentioned that.
Sure, and usually for clones, one of the big tricks for taking clones is you have that soil or your substrate just a few degrees warmer than the air temperature, and that'll usually stick your roots a little faster. That and the air, but there's lots of information on that now.
That's good to know. This next question I have is also from your book. I think it's going to shock a lot of folks. One of the common things that folks do is they'll do some sort of defoliation, a pruning of leaves prior to flipping to the flowering stage. Now, in your book, as mentions, avoid pruning up to a month before inducing flowering. Since pruning diffuses floral hormones, flowering is slowed down. If heavy pruned before flowering, peak maturation is delayed for a week or longer, and it takes a month or longer for hormones to build up to pre-pruning concentrations. I thought this was super, super interesting, because people go against this quite often. Now, first of all, is this still true to today?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, there was one study that I read that promoted pruning indoor plants that were grown indoors, and that it proved that they got 10-12% more harvest, I believe it was. And I went to look up the study before the program, before the podcast, and I couldn't find it. But that's the only study that I could find. And a lot of the other information that I've gotten has been hearsay information or anecdotal information. No side-by-side study that's really firm. And so that's why I said that. And then for outdoor plants, definitely don't prune them. I mean, I don't see any benefit whatsoever. And especially, if you look at this, as far as pruning goes, removing the shade leaves, because that's what it is. Pruning, trimming, they have different meanings, but removing the shade leaves, which is specific. Those guys, I think a lot of people have a small garden and they get antsy and they just want to do something. So they take off the leaves, And then I also see a lot of people do this lollipopping, they call it, where they take up all the leaves off the bottom, or all the leaves off the bottom of the plant. And I think that's crazy because you already paid for all of that light to grow those plants. And then you're going to go and cut those branches off. It doesn't make much sense. Now, if you've got some really weak growths down there, sure, cut that branch off, fine. But taking it off as a matter of fact, no, I'd be growing all the way down to the bottom, the bottom of the ground. It makes more sense because it's just a waste. Like I say, the light's been spent, the fertilizer's been spent, everything's been spent, but mainly it's the time. So you've got like 3 weeks of time that you're not getting any benefit from. If you've done anything, you've wasted that time. So I don't know. I mean, I just can't find any good information. And I'm hoping that people here will put these studies down, because normally what happens is people go, well, I do it and it works for me. It's like, well, so what? It doesn't tell me anything other than it works for you, but you haven't qualified anything. So you gotta make an actual study on this stuff.
Still have so much anecdotal grow science that's floating around. People say, hey, it works for me, so it should work for everybody.
Yeah. Or what kind of variety was it? What was the temperatures and everything? All of that's really important,
Absolutely. Yeah, but when it comes to the lollipopping, I know one of the main reasons why folks do it is they claim that lower area, if buds form there, it's more of like an airier structure, and removing that will help keep the top buds, focus its energy on the top buds kind of forming, and it helps with density and stuff like that. Now I know it's cultivar dependent, stuff like that, but I figured I'd give you a heads up on why some people are doing that. And then as far as defoliation, one of the main reasons why folks like to do it is to avoid, like if you have real thick canopy, powdery mildew, right? So if there's like real thick lack of airflow in there, that's one of the main reasons, just to prevent powdery mildew from forming. So figured I'd throw that one out there in case anybody listening wasn't aware.
But the way to solve those problems is with genetic superiority, because
100%.
that's the way you do it. That works. And then also with the type of cultivar you're growing, you don't have such a tight compact flowers, because those will make the powdery mildew, or they'll make the botrytis, or they'll make a home for insects and mites. I mean, we've got tons of work to do as far as breeding goes. Because I mean, another one as far as breeding goes is that the branches aren't strong enough, for example, to hold the flowers up. The flowers will pull the branches over, or some plants, or a lot of plants, don't have a big enough root system, for example. That's really important. Or the disease and pest resistance is super important as well. And and also being immune to like heat and cold problems, huge deals, huge.
Understood. Now, one of the things that kind of relates to this a little bit was talking about inducing flowering, in particular, waiting until pre-flowers have appeared. So I've heard that you really should wait to induce flowering, or switch to that flowering light cycle.
Right.
Wait until the pre-flowers have appeared. It said that such stress, if you go against that, could cause strange growth. Plants may grow into hermaphrodites, so showing intersex traits. What's your take on that?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Because, like I say, the plants don't change that fast. And when they've been growing the same way for millions of years, they're not going to deviate from that very fast, so they're going to stay growing that way, right? And two, like I mentioned before, the cell walls will get more thinner, narrower. They're not as strong. And so there's all kinds of stuff that produces stress. And, any kind of, and that'd be photoperiod stress, because we've got the ability to make the plant flower, to induce flowering really quickly by, giving it longer nights. So you'd be stressing the plant out. And stress, they don't like stress. And in general, let's say, pretty much everybody's grown, radishes. I mentioned radishes earlier. But radishes, as soon as it gets hot, or as soon as they're stressed out at all, they always bolt. They go to seed every time. And, like I say, most people have grown radishes. So what happens, anytime a plant gets stressed, they try to complete their life cycle and produce a viable seed in general. That's the first thing they do. So anytime you stress out a plant, any kind of a plant, they're going to try to complete their life cycle. And they're going to want to make seeds and want to and try to get them planted in the ground, so they'll be healthy next year and they'll procreate for another year. It's just so straightforward and simple, and people that aren't really experienced with gardening think they can go in and change all of that. Well, the system's already been set up before you got here.
That makes sense. Now, another thing I've heard talking about the amount of light given to the plant, or really darkness. We know that when you flip the flower, it's really the darkness period that's going to have the plant produce florigen, the flowering hormone. Does giving the plant less than 12 hours of light induce any flowering faster? And does it reduce yield?
Yeah, it reduces yield because there's that thing, that daily light integral. You got to have so many hours of light of a specific spectrum and intensity every 24 hours for it to receive all the light it needs to flower properly. So if it doesn't get that, so if you've got say it, 10 hours, say it's 10 hours of light it gets, so you've got to stuff 10 hours or 12 hours of light into that 10 hours, right? So you just got to give it more intense light, and technically that's quite difficult to do. So that's number one. And then let's see, less light, and so you don't get as much light. It's not as bright. Yeah, so your DLI goes down, so you're definitely going to get less production, guaranteed. And the other part is, we don't know. This is my feeling, and I believe that it goes all the way here. We have toda abanica is what we use here in Spain. It's like the whole spectrum or fan. Everybody, you have the whole fan. So you can have a plant over here that is auto flowering, that flowers after like 3 weeks, right? Okay, so that's one side. And then you can have a plant over on the other side that says one of those really long season sativas that really doesn't ever quit flowering. It continues. So you've got this entire spectrum from one side to the other, complete spectrum maybe. Yeah, it doesn't mean light spectrum, it means spectrum of difference. Yeah, they're completely different at opposite ends of the scale. So I believe that in between here is you've got everything else too. So with this one here, you can get 24 hours of light, and this one here you can have like 10 hours of light, or and longer photo period, or longer light period, and longer nights. But everything in between is the same. So what does that mean? That means that you're going to get plants that flower with 12 hours of light, with 14 hours of light, with 10 hours of light. We don't know which ones because we don't know enough yet. And we usually, and usually with these plants, since it's an outbreeder, we don't know what's we don't know if it's stable or not. First, it's got to be stable, and then you can measure it. Well, there's so much unstable stuff out there that we're not really doing ourselves a service of making more varieties that aren't stable. So it's kind of, we go around in circles, and it's going to take some big agricultural company to sort that stuff out, actually, I think.
Sticking on the topic of light, UV light, I want to get into that a little bit. Can you talk to us about UV light and how it impacts trichome development?
Yeah, the UV, the the best example I have, there's probably better information than this, but in Switzerland, see, you used to be able to grow any plant you wanted in Switzerland about 20 years ago. And a friend of mine was growing these plants at 900 meters, and he also had another garden at 300 meters in elevation, right? So 300 meters about 1,000, and 900 meters about 3,000. So it's quite a bit of difference, or 4,000. So what happened is the ones at 900 meters, those plants had really heavy trichomes on it because they get more UV light, and they will put, and then the trichomes are there, or these, the capitate stalk trichomes are the ones we care about. But trichomes just means plant hair, so it could be any kind of a plant hair. And there's, within that classification, there's there's quite a few different types. But anyway, with more UV light, they make more trichomes to cover up the foliage and protect it better. It doesn't necessarily make more potent trichomes. It just makes more of them. So as far as increase in potency, no, I didn't see that. But the number of trichomes, yeah. Now this is also real interesting. The garden down below at 300 meters, it was the same potency approximately as the one up above in relation to weight, because let's see, in relation to weight, what do I mean? If you took one plant and that would weigh say 100 grams, and then at 300 meters, and then you take another plant at 900 meters, and that would weigh 80 grams, well, they still had the same potency, the same level of stuff in it.
Pretty straightforward answer there. Yeah, I've heard pretty much the same stuff over the course of the past several years.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I found so far too. And so we all agree. That's good.
I want to get into something a little bit more controversial next, flushing plants or soil prior to harvest. Should growers flush their plants or soil prior to harvest? If so, what are the benefits?
Okay, the number one is the term, because what they would actually be doing, they're not flushing the plant, they're actually leaching the soil. Flushing's a different term, and usually people use that term, flushing. I made this mistake until I was corrected. So now it doesn't make any difference whatsoever. You can grow fertilize right up to the end. What the deal is, see, now this is where my perspective comes in. This is the good part about being an old guy. Because see, when this industry grew, the real money, there was real money in fertilizer. That's where the money was at, because people needed it over and over, and then they could keep buying it over and over. Well, as we all know, most of what you find in fertilizer is water. So they take a little bit, and to make $1, like, well, say if we use $1, for example, make $1 worth of fertilizer that you would buy retail, it costs you about 2 to 3 pennies to make that. So you've got a big margin there. So that's why everybody seemed to be an expert in fertilizers. And because that's where the only place they make any money at it, and you couldn't make any money at lights because they were made by big companies, and or the other stuff, you could buy all of that stuff at the nursery. But the fertilizers, if you had your special fertilizer, well, then you could grow the best plants, the biggest plants. So everybody was an expert. Well, now you go into a nursery, for example, any plant, just any kind of a plant nursery, and you look and see, you go to the fertilizer section, and you see there'd be about like 20, maybe 30 different fertilizers for, I don't know, 200-300, maybe 500 different types of plants. You got 20 kinds of fertilizers for 500 different kinds of plants. Well, you got this plant, the one that we've been dealing with, this plant here, and what do we have? We have one plant and like 500 kind of fertilizers for it. Something's backwards. Well, it's money. Money is the thing that's made the big difference. So what they've done is, and then they make that the hydroponic fertilizers. They make all kinds of different mixes with them and stuff. Well, that's just to take people's money out of their pocket, because I never used all that stuff, and it's worked fine for me. Yeah, so that's what I'd be thinking out about more than anything else. I don't have any good statistics here, but I was a garden writer in America. Like Garden Writers of America. We had an association, a national association. Yeah, and one of the things that we learned there was, see, people home gardeners put about 10 times more fertilizer and chemicals on their gardens than they need to, and the same goes with indoor growers too. They put a lot more stuff on there than they need to, and it's a real good living and stuff, but a lot of that stuff you just don't need. You don't need. They got you loaded up so heavily on all the fertilizers. I wonder. I mean, it's not I'm not going to be real popular with a few people in the industry, but man, I mean, all those fertilizer guys made tons of money. I mean, serious money. And some guys had like 7 different products you'd put in. You got a little pot here, and you got 7 different products you put in there. That's a lot. I don't understand that. Now, and then the farmers, you just need a little bit of fritted trace elements, the fritted trace elements, those are the ones that, it means like claw, so it hooks. It hooks onto the other elements, and it stays with them, so it's immediately available. And then that, and then your primary nutrients, and that's about it. Secondary ones, and they mix sulfur with everything. It's just like hooked onto sulfur molecules, hooked onto everything, it seems. So you don't need any sulfur because it's already there. Yeah. But if anything, I would suggest that they get a soil test. If you want to do something, get a soil test. That's the best thing to do, because then you find out what you need. And all also with the organic stuff, people carry that over, go overboard on that. I know I certainly did in the first few years when I was organic gardening, gardening organically. I had, I don't know, maybe 10% organic matter in the soil, and 5 is a lot. Yeah, but it causes more trouble than it's worth. But yeah, I mean, you go to a soil scientist and they will always call it mineral soil because it's mainly minerals. You know, those guys are really well educated, and I'd listen to them.
Yeah, it could be super helpful to get that soil test, and even talking to an expert. Like I talked to Brian Mason, the soil doctor. I'm not sure if you know who he is or not, but he's excellent, very knowledgeable, and he does consulting. He's a crop advisor. So he can take your soil test and then kind of give you information on what you need to add into it. And I think that's a great way to go about it for sure. I do think you can't overdo it as well, like you had mentioned, like you had done. I've overdone it as well when it comes to the organic side of things. So it is possible. I think that's a misconception out there is people say that, oh, if you're growing with organic inputs or all natural inputs, the plant's just going to uptake what it wants when it wants. So there's no harm in putting too much, which we know now is definitely not true. So
No, not at all. I mean, you can like hot manures, for example. There's all kinds of stuff you can burn with. You look at that, and it's expensive too. The bat guano, that's really expensive, and I mean, you know how hard it is to chase those little bats around, have them poop in a bag. I mean, it's a tough job, man. Tough job. Those guys should get paid a lot. Yeah.
That's funny. I want to shift over to drying. I wanted to get your input on what do you feel is the optimal drying conditions and drying time?
Oh man, see, there you go. There's all these different variables. First off, it depends on how the plant's harvested, how big the plant is. Do you have the main stem? Is the main stem there, or is there going to be smaller stems? So say for example, if you harvest a plant and you cut all the flowers off of the stems and then the leaves off of the flowers, then you've just got flower buds there. Well, those can be put in on one of those like drying screens or something. They have those expandable net shelves that open up, and you've got usually it's 2 or 3 feet across. I think I had one that was 4 feet across. That was really big. It would hold a lot. Yeah. But yeah, you can dry them a lot faster in there than with a big plant where you hold the entire plant and keep the stems. Because see, there's different levels of moisture. See, you've got a stem this big. Well, that's going to hold more moisture than a stem this big. They're just different sizes. So this has more moisture than this one. And then the leaf that's real narrow or real thin will dissipate much quicker too. So the idea is to equalize everything out. You want to get out all the pigments and stuff. And God, there's tons of stuff in there that makes it taste green or ammonia-like. But the drying volatilizes all of that, or just basically it dissipates into the air. So you can get rid of all of that. So it depends on what you want. You can either keep the leaves on or take the leaves off right at first when it's supple. Usually smaller growers will do that. And then big growers usually wait and they'll dry the whole branches, the whole plant first, or parts of the plant, and then remove the leaves afterwards. It seems to be more efficient that way. And then I'll tell you, I just got these. I I just got these things here. They're from Seedsman, and there's apparently Terplock. It's called Terplock, yeah. But it's 58 to 62% humidity, and the ones I've seen have been, well, they go from 55 to 60, 65, but it depends. This is approximately how much humidity here. The way I do, or that you want your plant to have, what I do is I did, I measured it, what the flower weighs when it's wet, and then when it's dissipated 3/4 of its moisture. That'll be say if it weighs 10 grams when it's dry or when it's wet, it would weigh 2.5 grams when it's dry, and that would put it at approximately 70% moisture, 60% moisture, in that range. After that, then you're going to have to check yourself. My rule of thumb, the one I came up with years ago, is like when you snap the stem. If the stem actually snaps, then it's dry. Or if it's dry enough, but if it's dry enough to burn. But I'll tell you, if you can measure the humidity, or the moisture within the flower, it's perfect to do it that way. If you can measure that, you're best off. And then you come down to the curing, and the curing, I'm kind of like rambling on here. The curing, what you do is you want to even out the moisture, because you had the real thin leaf and then the thick stem, so they'll hold different moisture at different rates. Well, you want to balance that out, and what curing will do is it evens those two moistures out. Hope that was a good enough answer. I kind of found myself rambling a little.
That's all right. I appreciate your insight on that one. We have reached the hour mark here, so we're going to wrap things up. Can you tell listeners how they can find you, and is there anything upcoming in the future that you want to talk about?
Yeah, let's see. We got a lot of stuff. I got a lot of stuff going on. You can go to Jorge, Jorge Cervantes, CERVANTES.com, Jorge Cervantes. And you see this mug right here? And you can look up all kinds of history about me. And there's lots of garden information, tons of garden information. And then you can go to that site, and you can also pick up this book here for free in 11 different languages. And it's just like 600 pages, A4 format in Europe, or 8.5 by 11 inches in the United States. And then let's see, next month, right out a month from now, is going to be Spanabiz in Barcelona. And I've been talking to people and making all kinds of plans and stuff. But that's a real big fair. It used to be the biggest one in the world. But now Las Vegas is bigger, the Las Vegas Fair, and also the German fair, Mary Jane, which is in Berlin, and that's in June, in middle of June. But that fair is huge. It was way bigger than the fair we have here in Barcelona. And then also I'll be going to haven't decided for sure, but I probably will go up there to Amsterdam to Green Tech, and that is really a good fair. That is the biggest horticultural fair in the world, and we have our own section there. People like us, we have our own section, And before, they used to kick us out all the time. But now we can hold our heads up high. I'm very happy about that.
Awesome. So lots of exciting stuff upcoming there. I'll definitely have a link to Jorge's YouTube channel down in the YouTube description section below so you can easily access his channel. Jorge, thanks so much for coming on this podcast. This was great. A lot of good insight here. It's really an honor to have you on here. Like I mentioned, I picked up your book almost 15 years ago now, and I've learned so much from you over the years. So I just want to thank you for all your contributions over the years. Looking forward to seeing what you have coming out in the future. And before I end this, I want to give a thank you to the folks that support on Patreon, patreon.com/Mr. Grow It. The folks being scrolled on the screen right now are in the producers tier. Special thanks to you. You are one of the ones that keep this podcast going. So thank you so much. Jorge, we will leave it at that. Thanks again for coming on the podcast and hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Hey, for sure. For sure. It's late in the day now, so I'm happy.
All right.
Okay.
Have a good night, everyone. Take care. I'll catch you in the next episode.